The book of Job, chapter 29. And Job continued and said in his parable, Oh, that I were as in months past, wherein God preserved me, as when his lamp shone over my head, when by his light I walked through darkness, as when I steadfastly pursued my ways, when God took care of my house, when I was very fruitful, and my children were about me, when my ways were moistened with butter, and the mountains flowed for me with milk, when I went forth early in the city, and the seat was placed for me in the streets. The young men saw me and hid themselves, and all the old men stood up. And the great men ceased speaking, and laid their finger on the mouth. And they that heard me blessed me, and their tongue clave to their throat. For the ear heard and blessed me, and the eye saw me and turned aside. For I saved the poor out of the hand of the oppressor, and helped the fatherless who had no helper. Let the blessing of the perishing one come upon me. Yea, the mouth of the widow has blessed me. Also I put on righteousness and clothed myself with judgment like a mantle. I was the eye of the blind and the foot of the lame. I was the father of the helpless, and I searched out the cause which I knew not. And I broke the jaw teeth of the unrighteous. I plucked the spoil out of the midst of their teeth. And I said, My age shall continue as the stem of a palm tree. I shall live a long while. My root was spread out by the water, and the dew would lodge on my crop. My glory was fresh in me, and my bow prospered in his hand. Men heard me and gave heed, and they were silent at my counsel. At my word they spoke not again, and they were very glad whenever I spoke to them. As the thirsty earth expecting the rain, so they waited for my speech. Were I to laugh on them, they would not believe it. And the light of my face has not failed. I chose out their way, and sat chief, and dwelt as a king in the midst of warriors, as one comforting mourners. Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum. Welcome to Job chapter 25, in which there are 25 verses. Beginning in verse 4, we read here, As when I steadfastly pursued my ways. So not Job's own path. This refers to his business, because Elohim gives the purposes and responsibilities, and Job rightly believes this. He sees this perspective. He sees his life from this perspective. Versus, as I was in the days of my youth. When God took care of my house, versus when the secret of Elohim was upon my tabernacle. So two different things being described there. Elohim taking care of him versus a secret upon his house. Verse 5, our first significant, perhaps big difference. When I was very fruitful versus when Shaddai was yet with me. So when I was productive in life versus when Elohim was with me. Verse 7, there's an omission of early. And the seat was placed for me in the streets versus I prepared my seat in the street. So someone else placed the seat for Job versus Job prepared it himself. Verse 9, and the great men ceased speaking. So finger versus hand is the difference there. Fast forwarding to verse 11. The eye saw me and turned aside. When the eye saw me, it gave witness to me. So it gave deference to Job versus they simply observed Job. Verse 14. And clothed myself with judgment like a mantle versus my judgment was as a robe, and an addition of and a diadem. With judgment versus my judgment. So it is perhaps Elohim's judgment or the authority of having judgment. There are different ways to interpret that. Verse 18. Another significant, perhaps big difference. My age shall continue as the stem of a palm tree versus I shall die in my nest. So Job saying in the Septuagint, I'm going to continue to live a long time versus I'm going to die. There is a clear contradiction in the Masoretic because he's saying right in the second half of the verse, I'm going to multiply my days as the sand. So which is it? Is he going to die in his nest? Or is he going to multiply his days? It's a little contradictory, in all honesty. Verse 19, crop versus branch. So his field, his farm, versus his tree branch. This could be a metaphor. It can also be translated as harvest, this word. Katsir. Verse 20, prospered, so succeeded in the hand of Adonai, of Hashem, versus renewed, refreshed in Job's hand. Skipping ahead to verse 22. Whenever I spoke to them, verses and my speech dropped upon them. So they were happy in the Septuagint versus the words fell on them. Verse 23. They waited for my speech versus they waited for him. They waited for Job. Not so much as words. Verse 24. Were I to laugh on them, they would not believe it. Versus if I laughed on them, they believed it not. So this one is a little cryptic. It's not easily understood at first glance. So reading from various study notes, Barnes notes, for example, reads the following. It seems to me that the sense is that so great was his influence, Job's influence, that he was able to control those under him, even with a smile, without even saying a word. That if, when a measure was proposed in a debate, if he even smiled, though he said nothing, they would have no confidence in the smile, but would at once abandon it as unwise. No higher influence than this can be well conceived, and this exposition accords with the general course of remark, where Job traces along the various degrees of his influence until he comes to this, the highest influence of them all. Gill's exposition explains it thusly. It seems to me that the sense is that so great was Job's influence that he was able to control them. Oh, you know what? This is a repetition. Okay, I'm going to have to just accept that. In any case, just let me pause for one moment. Okay, so this is Gill's exposition. If I laughed on them, they believed it not. Not that he at any time laughed at them by way of derision, but when in a cheerful frame of mind, or if Job was in a merry mood, he used freedom and familiarity and jested with them, but they could not believe that he actually is genuinely jesting or was in jest. He, being a man always of such gravity and seriousness, that they concluded the smile on his face and the pleasant turn of his expression had a serious meaning in them, or such familiarity with them was so pleasing to them that they could scarcely for joy believe that he did condescend to indulge such an air of pleasantry, or as Mr. Broughton renders it, and so some others to the same sense, they would not be bold. Number one, familiarity with them did not breed contempt, as it sometimes does. They did not presume upon it, and grow bold and insolent and make him their equal and just with him again. But still there was an awe upon them, and they behaved with reverence to him. And to show how great it was is the design of the expression. Goes on to say, "In the light of my countenance they cast not down." What does that mean? Meaning they did not ruffle his mind or disturb the serenity of it or cause him to change his countenance through any bold and indecent behavior towards him, encouraged by the freedom and pleasantry he used with them. They did not put him to shame to provoke him to anger and displeasure by any unbecoming deportment. They kept their distance. They did not detract from his authority and majesty, or in the least lessen that, but behaved with the same reverence and regard to him that they ever did. So this is similar to, if you watch the movie The Godfather, Vito Corleone. If he laughs, you're not going to think he's actually laughing. You're going to take him seriously because this is a man of great authority and gravity. And so Job would be perceived in this way as a king, former king. And then it reads on in verse 24, the second half of the verse. There's an omission of "were I," so this is more of a possibility if this happened. So, and it does insert "if," but that's not originally part of the Masoretic. That has to be pointed out. "And the light of my face has not failed," versus "the light of my countenance they cast not down." So what that's saying is Job's presence, his presence of bringing favor and comfort, has not failed, or perhaps it could mean Job's authority and majesty continued. Versus the people were not able to change his face or overshadow Job's favor. They did not lose hope on Job. Okay, so verse 25, wrapping up. "I chose out their way and sat chief and dwelt as a king in the midst of warriors." And I would actually remove "as a king." This would be, I dwelt as king. Not that he was a type of king, he was literally king. Job and his three friends are all kings. So he sat as king, not as a king. He is king. Job was king in the midst of warriors, as one comforting mourners. He's a good king. Job goes into more detail regarding the type of authority he held over his people in this verse 25. Certainly a ruler and even a commander-in-chief, a statesman, one who is compassionate towards his people. So that's all for this chapter. Thank you very much for your time. Until next time, I bid you all shalom aleichem, assalamu alaikum, irini mazisu, pax vobiscum, peace be unto you, and maranatha.